Alright, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and y'all should already know by now with these training camp reports that we always start with the injuries. Then we break down every position group, starting with the quarterbacks, going all the way through the offense, and then all the way through the defense, along with special teams, and then any other random and important news that are outside of the Commanders' practice specifically that I need to provide to y'all. Of course, it was a lot going on today. Very weird day. Probably the weirdest day of training camp so far. A lot of highs, but also a lot of lows. There was a retirement, another one. Gibson fumbled twice. Cole Turner hurt a little bit. We're down to our 5th string tight end being our tight end number 1 right now at a certain point in practice. Don't overreact. We're going to break down and talk about exactly what's going down, especially injury-wise, and who made the best plays, who made the worst plays, all of that. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get a notification immediately. And every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, make sure y'all pull up tonight to the Friday night live stream 7 to 9 p.m. where we talk about literally everything, not even just sports, music, whatever. Also, make sure y'all pull up Sunday, every Sunday, to the call-in live stream where you get to call in. You can voice your opinions about whatever, Commanders training camp, and you can ask me whatever questions you may have as well. Everything's on a 3-minute timer, so try to consolidate your thoughts, organize everything, and make sure you're ready when you call in, man. And without further ado, let's get it. Alright, so first of all, Tanya Snyder was observing from the red zone today at training camp, and this is day 9 of training camp. It's August 5th, Friday. Remember, tomorrow, August 6th, in the evening, it will be the training camp practice for the fans at FedEx Field. I'm really excited for those of y'all that are able to go. I won't be going, but I really hope it's fun. But again, Tanya Snyder was at practice today, and this is her 3rd straight practice being present. Again, Dan Snyder's not allowed to be around the team yet, and he probably doesn't care to anyway. He more than likely wouldn't be at practices either way. Also, one thing before we dive into the injuries, another thing to note is that today was definitely the hardest hitting practice of training camp so far. We're definitely starting to ramp everything up bit by bit, and Rivera said yesterday that Saturday's practice tomorrow will probably be even more active. Even if it's not as hard hitting, it's going to be more exciting. Again, they're going to put on a performance for y'all, for everybody that's there to spectate. So they're going to throw deep bombs, they're going to try out trick plays, they're going to allow a lot of contested catch situations, all kinds of stuff. They're gonna have fun. Again, it's gonna be more so a show and a performance along with it being a regular practice. But today, if we're just talking about collisions, today was easily the most active and aggressive and hardest hitting day so far of our entire offseason. I mean, there were times where guys collided, they wrestled around, and then they would hit the ground. Definitely the most physical practice of the offseason so far. Now let's get to injuries. And it's actually crazy too, because with all of this physicality, none of the injuries that we're going to discuss today came from any like real contact. It was a hot day. Maybe guys didn't stay hydrated as much as they should have, so there was some hamstring tweaks, but we're going to get to that. But of course, Curtis Samuel, part of his plan was for him to be on the side field today. Of course, you also had De'Ami Brown, John Bates, and Troy Apke on the side field, along with DeJuan Neal and now Sadiq Charles as well. And then James Smith-Williams with his hip injury and Trey Turner with his quad injury also still remain out. They've already been missing practices. Today was the same. But as far as Curtis Samuel goes, Ron Rivera already said it a few days ago. We're going to ramp him up and then ramp him back down. So don't get too overreactive when it comes to Curtis Samuel not playing, because when he's been in pads, he's looked really good. From last week when he full-blown participated in team drills, he juked Benjamin St. Juste out of his socks. Then they ramped him down. He was on the side field for a few days. Then he came back and balled out yesterday and caught a bunch of passes, took on contact very well. He got hit and would bounce back up like nothing happened. He was running routes very smoothly. He was very quick. Everything that you'd expect Curtis Samuel to look like, he looked like it. And then now we're ramping him back down again. So maybe he'll participate in Saturday's practice. I'm still not sure yet, but he definitely didn't participate today. Again, which was expected. And so I know a lot of media and fans are super upset about it. And even me, like I said, for me, I'm not even upset to me, he's not on the team until I see him go out there in a regular season game and perform. I mean, maybe preseason can get my hopes up a little bit, but I'm not even upset. I'm not even overreacting. Right now, he's just an extra piece that if we get him, great. If we don't, that's how I felt the whole time already. But again, Ron Rivera and Curtis Samuel apparently have a plan where he's going to get ramped up, ramped back down, ramped up, ramped back down. We'll see him fully participate in team drills, pads and all, and then he'll take some days off. And then lastly, before we start to get into each position group, undrafted free agent Trey Walker from Idaho retired. Remember, we already had Antonio Gandy Golden retire. We already lost Drew White to a torn ACL this week. And so our linebacker group, I mean, granted, those two undrafted free agents between Trey Walker and Drew White, maybe they wouldn't have made the team anyway if they were to be fully healthy and not retire. But still, it's really interesting that our depth is getting even weaker because even the starters, we still have some questions. And granted, the top 4 linebackers have been untouched, no injuries, nobody retiring or anything like that. But it's still weird that we have some guys on the back end, on the roster bubble, on the outside looking in, leaving for whatever reason. Again, Drew White torn ACL, Trey Walker retirement. Now let's get into these position group observations, starting with quarterback. Nothing very notable today. The most important thing that you need to take from today is that Wentz is starting to hit his running backs a lot more often in training camp practices. He had one pass to Antonio Gibson for a touchdown, and it was a really good play because it wasn't even like his first read. He read everything, he didn't like what he saw, and then checked it down to Antonio Gibson afterwards. So he's progressing through his reads, and he's willing to check down and not force things as much as he normally did throughout his career before coming here. So that's great to hear, man. I mean, we got to see in regular season if he's actually going to continue to do that, but I like the fact that Scott Turner just keeps regurgitating to him, check it down, take the layup when you got it, don't force anything. I really appreciate that, even though it's practice. If anything, in practice, when we're not even playing a game, this doesn't go in a win or lose column. This will be the time that you will force things, but I like the fact that he's trying to do it over and over again to where it becomes natural, it becomes instinct, it becomes muscle memory, to where if nothing's there, just check it down to the running back or get out of bounds, or even if you got to take the sack, at least just don't make some mind-boggling dumb turnover, fumble, or weird flick interception thing, like just going halfway down to the ground already, try to throw something up and it gets picked off. Anything but that, man. And I like the fact that Scott Turner is not only providing them options for check downs, but you can definitely tell that he's constantly on Carson Wentz, like, hey man, if there's nothing there, please take the layup. And it's even resulting in touchdowns. And I think if we go into games with that strategy, that can open things up deep. I think it's going to work hand in hand. We can attack deep, which is going to open things up underneath. Now that we have a strong arm quarterback like Carson Wentz, we have a bunch of speedsters that can get open down the field. That's going to just naturally make things open down underneath. But at the same time, when we start attacking teams underneath so much and you start seeing Antonio Gibson getting touchdowns and things like that, that's going to open things up deep. I think it's just going to go hand in hand. And then lastly, nothing really notable from Sam Howell or Taylor Heinicke today. Not great days, also not bad days. But in Sam Howell's press conference, I believe this is his first press conference of training camp, he said, quote, that Taylor has been awesome for me. I'm very appreciative. He's willing to help a young guy like me, unquote. So shouts out to Taylor Heinicke for not being afraid of Sam Howell potentially taking his job as the direct backup to Carson Wentz. Shouts out to Taylor Heinicke for dropping as many jewels as he can, because Sam Howell easily has a physical advantage over Taylor Heinicke, but right now Taylor Heinicke is a veteran. He has far more experience. He's definitely more playable in the game right now, as we've seen from last year. I mean, Taylor Heinicke is definitely a high-end backup quarterback, but Sam Howell, with his physical traits, if he can take all of the mental stuff that Taylor Heinicke has, he can definitely become the better quarterback. And shouts out to Taylor Heinicke for not having too much of an ego to help the young guy out. Really appreciate that. Now moving to the running backs, in warm-ups, Brian Robinson looked like a natural hands catcher when the ball was getting thrown to him. It looked beautiful. He's not catching it with his body. He's literally catching it with his hands like a receiver. It's ridiculous. And then also when they started to get the team drills, Brian Robinson was able to break open for a 15-yard gain. Shouts out to the offensive line, but also shouts out to his vision, and he's more explosive than what people think for a guy his size. We know him as this potential bruiser, a red zone. We just need to get 2 yards type of guy, 4th down, 3rd down and short, all of that type of stuff. But he's actually more explosive and a little bit quicker than you think. And he's going to be able to break off 10+ yard runs quite often. And then when they went through goal line drills, Taylor Heinicke was able to hit him for a touchdown. And I've been hearing that he looks really good running routes. Of course, he doesn't look as good of a wide receiver doing it, but as far as running back standards go, he looks pretty good and looks way better than what people thought he would look like coming out of college. Again, his hands look really good. He's looking better running routes than people expected. I think he's going to be an every down type of back, which is going to be huge for us because, again, like I've talked about in several videos and live streams, Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, all of those guys being able to catch the ball out of the backfield, run routes and catch the ball past the line of scrimmage and be able to run inside the tackles, in between the tackles, and run outside the tackles. When they're on the field, it doesn't automatically telegraph what we're trying to do to the opposing defense. Brian Robinson on the field does not necessarily mean we're just trying to run the ball up the A-gap. That's great, because if you do want to run the ball up the A-gap with Brian Robinson, since defenses have to worry about him being a passing game threat and worry about him getting outside the tackles and running the ball that way, that will make it easier for him to do what he does best, which is run up the A-gap. Also, Antonio Gibson took the first carry of camp, and it looked pretty good. And then he also had a really good touchdown catch where he beat Cameron Curl to the left pylon. And then really outside of that, it was a bad day. Antonio Gibson let a pass bounce off of his pads in 7-on-7s earlier in the day. And then on top of that, he had 2 fumbles. Now, one of them was like a botched exchange with Carson Wentz. Still not exactly sure whose fault it was, but when in doubt, it's usually the running backs, to be completely honest. And then that one was recovered by the defense. And then he got popped by Casey Toohill and then fumbled because of that. And that was recovered by Casey Toohill, and he started running the opposite way, of course. So earlier in practice, 7-on-7s, Antonio Gibson drops a pass that hits him right in the chest. And then in goal line red zone situational drills, he had 2 lost fumbles. Again, one of them was a botched exchange from Carson Wentz to him, but still. And then on to the wide receivers, not much to really note. I mean, in warm-ups, Jahan Dotson had this beautiful, just best hands on the team type of catch. It just looks so smooth. Love Terry McLaurin, but Jahan Dotson probably does have the better hands, honestly. And then speaking of Terry McLaurin, he had a really nice catch against Danny Johnson from Carson Wentz at some point in practice. And also Cam Sims in red zone drills had a really nice catch for a touchdown. But a lot of people, especially the defense, were arguing that it technically wasn't in bounds. He wasn't able to get his feet in. But either way, still a nice play by Cam Sims. But other than that, nothing really notable from the wide receivers. Just business as usual. Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, everybody making the plays they usually make. And then moving on to tight ends, another guy that looked really good in warm-ups today, Cole Turner. Just like Jahan Dotson, ridiculously smooth hands. I mean, a ball was thrown slightly like within his radius, and he just went up and grabbed it and made it look so easy. And then people noticed at some point during individual drills, he tweaked his hamstring while running a route, and he looked a little gimpy, limping a little bit, but then they allowed him to participate in team drills. And then he got hit by Percy Butler, the safety that I'm really rooting for. I hope he can become our starting free safety sooner rather than later. We'll see. But apparently, and we'll talk about that in the defensive back section, of course, but Percy Butler has stepped up and made a lot of really good tackles today. And one specifically to Cole Turner, he hit him for probably the biggest hit we've had in a Washington training camp practice so far. And afterwards, Cole Turner walked off on his own to the side, but he didn't have a limp then. And he went to the tent and he talked to trainers, and he clearly wanted to come back to practice. He felt like he was good enough to go, but Al Bellamy overruled it and told him to just sit down to the side. And to everybody there, everybody says that it doesn't look like anything serious, but again, this commander, front office, coaching staff, everybody, training staff, they're going to be overly cautious if anything. And so we'll see if he even participates in Saturday's practice, because I really hope he does, because I know a lot of fans feel like he's probably one of the top 5 guys that they're most excited about watching for that practice, because he's been making a lot of plays, and you could argue he's been one of the best players in training camp so far. At the very least, one of the most consistent. consistent. So I don't want everybody getting mad at Percy Butler. It was a pretty hard hit, but he was already dealing with the issue earlier. And again, he looks fine. They're just being overly cautious and holding him to the side for now. We'll see if he participates in Saturday's practice. And we're very, even in his press conference, assured that it's not a major issue and it was a hamstring tweak. And again, it was really hot outside. Maybe he just didn't hydrate enough, because Sammis Reyes had a similar issue. He also had a hamstring issue at some point in the practice. So now you have Logan Thomas on PUP list with a knee injury, John Bates dealing with a calf injury. He hasn't practiced yet. I'm not even sure in training camp. It definitely hasn't practiced within the last few practices. And then you have Cole Turner dealing with a hamstring today, along with Sammis Reyes dealing with a hamstring today. So that technically means Curtis Hodges is your tight end 1 right now, and Armani Rogers is your tight end 2. Remember, Antonio Gandy Golden retired. But before Sammis Reyes was dealing with this hamstring issue, he had like a 20-yard running catch from Taylor Heineke, so that has me really excited. I love the fact that he's being involved in the passing game and he's getting better, because again, him and John Bates are our best blocking tight ends, and it's really not even close. After them, it's a big gap, and then maybe Logan Thomas, probably Curtis Hodges, honestly. And so if Sammis Reyes can become a dual threat tight end, that's going to be huge, because again, he's one of the best blocking tight ends on the team, and John Bates is arguably one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL, and Sammis Reyes is not far from him. At the very least, he's more physical and stronger, just still needs to work on some technique a little bit. And then moving on to the offensive line, with all the injuries and moving pieces, we had Keith Ishmael starting at center, and then we had Wes Schweitzer starting at guard. And really nothing noteworthy. I mean, again, there was some open lanes for running backs. Like I've been saying the past few videos, we expected the offensive line to look better once we put on pads, so I'm not surprised that run lanes are starting to open and Carson Wentz is getting a little bit more time to throw the ball. John Moscow is just going to do what John Moscow does, and I love the fact that he doesn't care who you are. He expects you to go out there and do your job no matter how far you are in the depth chart, no matter how far down, no matter how far you are on the outside looking in on the roster. He expects greatness from everybody. And there was even one situation where a younger lineman was a little late to his temporary duties as a linebacker for a practice drill, because sometimes they act as stand-in defenders during walkthrough like situations, and John Moscow was livid. I mean, he literally said, quote, "You're always on defense, you're not a starter," unquote. I mean, he does not hold back at all. He lets everybody have it. Doesn't matter if you're the best player or the worst player. If you're an offensive lineman, John Moscow is on your head if you're not doing everything right all the time. And I think that's one of the main reasons why he's arguably the best coach on our team and arguably one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. His expectations are so high, and he does not allow anything less. Now moving on to defense, and the theme of the day was the defense pretty much won again. Now the offense did make some plays, but when we got to the goal line situation, there was a really bad series for the offense. First down, Antonio Gibson lost from a Casey Toohill tackle for loss, which we're going to talk about when we get to the defensive line. Casey Toohill had himself a great day today, his best day of the offseason, probably his best day of practice in his NFL career so far. And then you had Brian Robinson rush for a short gain on second down. Then third down, you had play action by Wentz, but it was incomplete. Jamin Davis in coverage. We're going to talk about that when we get to the linebackers. And then on fourth down, it was a bad exchange from Carson Wentz to Antonio Gibson, the fumble that we discussed earlier. And it took them 7 straight plays from the 1-yard line to finally score a touchdown, and they got in for a rushing touchdown. But man, 7 plays? Man, we got to improve there. Now, granted, our defense is really stout, and one thing you can't take away from this defense is that they've been pretty good, at least in the red zone, especially Chase Young's rookie season, man. We were like the best red zone defense in the NFL that year, and even last year with a lot of the problems that we had, especially on third down, we had like the worst third down defense in NFL history, but at the very least we were straight / good in the red zone. So I'm not surprised, but the offense got to catch up, because we're going to need to score points. When we get to the 1-yard line, it shouldn't take you 7 plays to score. You're not going to get 7 plays unless there's some crazy rare penalty that happens, and we cannot go out there and constantly score 3 points. We need touchdowns this season. But moving on to the defensive line, today was a day that they tried to work on a lot of running drills and really simulate a lot of running situations. And so just like with that goal line situation that we just talked about, where the defense dominated, the defense ran with a lot of 5-2-4 fronts. So you had Montez Sweat, then Deron Payne, Fadarian Mathis, Jonathan Allen, and Casey Toohill as your starting 5 defensive linemen. And remember last year, we had quite a bit of success with that. And even in that Buccaneers playoffs game, Taylor Heineke starting. We ran a lot of 5 defensive lineman looks, and it worked pretty well that day as well. That was pretty much the only time that we were able to get any pressure on Tom Brady that day. And so I can't wait for Chase Young to get back, because 5 defensive linemen, that 5-2-4 is going to be deadly with Chase Young. But Casey Toohill has stepped up big time, and he's looking like our best replacement for Chase Young so far, especially after the day he had today. But before we get to that, Montez Sweat doing Montez Sweat things. There was even one play where Carson Wentz scrambled to his right, and then he ended up having to run out of bounds, and Montez Sweat was hawking him down and screaming at him. He said, "Get rid of it, get rid of it," which I thought was really interesting because that's not something you hear or see every day. And then also, earlier in the day, in one-on-one pass rush drills, while other players were doing 7-on-7s, Efe Obada had a really good rep against Aaron Montaro, one of those deep backup offensive tackles. He had a really good rep against him. I mean, won very easily. And remember, Ron Rivera was talking just yesterday about how Efe Obada has improved with his technique and mechanics. And so we're starting to see that produce some results, but we got to see it against Charles Leno and Samuel Cosme for us to really care about it, whether or not you've really improved that much. And then now on to Casey Toohill, had himself a great day. Casey Toohill first started with blowing up a run play for a tackle for loss against Antonio Gibson, and he ran from the opposite side of the play to make the tackle for loss. I mean, that was just straight hustle and a great heads-up aware play. And then later on, remember, Casey Toohill was the one that forced the fumble on Antonio Gibson. I mean, it was a fumble immediately on contact, and then the ball happened to kind of bounce towards Casey Toohill's way, and he took advantage of the opportunity, caught it, and started running the opposite way. That man balled out today. It's sad that it came at the expense of Antonio Gibson, but hey, put that pressure on Antonio Gibson. Strip the ball from him, do everything you got to so that he can learn how to stop it from happening by the time we get to these regular season games. Now moving on to linebacker, it is still really weird. David Mayo is getting quite a bit of run with the ones, with the starting teams, and especially today, since it was like red zone goal line drills, he actually ran with the ones more than Jamin Davis, which I don't exactly understand, because ideally, you don't want David Mayo ever starting a game for you. You don't even want to bring him on the field, really, honestly, at any point, because he's such a huge liability in coverage, and I don't even think he's like that great in run defense. He's better than Jamin Davis, but still, I don't want David Mayo on the field every game. So what is the point of us still doing this in practice? Give Jamin Davis the important reps that he needs. And then what's also more interesting about the situation is that I'm seeing from multiple reporters there that Jamin Davis had his best practice this summer today. Today was like the first day he like really shined. He made plays against the run, and he was excellent in pass coverage. And I'm also hearing that he just looked like he was more energetic today. He was moving faster, he was quicker. Everything just looked like an improved linebacker mentally and physically. But maybe because he balled out so much today as in Friday, maybe moving on, going forward, starting with Saturday, we'll start to see Jamin Davis getting more reps with the ones over at David Mayo. Remember earlier, like I mentioned, Jamin Davis forced an incompletion, and then there was one play where Carson Wentz was trying to get the ball to Armani Rogers, and Jamin Davis had such great coverage that Carson Wentz decided to throw the ball away. There's a lot of things to take from that. First of all, we're talking about Jamin Davis right now. Wanted to point out that Jamin Davis was excellent in coverage. Just wanted to repeat that. Also, I love hearing my boy Armani Rogers mentioned. Now, granted, it wasn't a positive play for him, but I'm glad he's out there and at least trying to take advantage of all of the opportunities that he's getting now that the 4 tight ends above him all ended up missing practice for one reason or another. And then most importantly, the fact that Carson Wentz is throwing the ball away when it's not there. I think that's the most notable thing from that play. But yeah, this Jamin Davis thing is definitely worrying me because, again, ideally you don't want David Mayo on the field at all. I guess the coaching staff is higher on David Mayo than I am, but I just don't see why. Maybe if today were a game, I can understand why you would have David Mayo in goal line situations. But right now, while we're trying to practice and get better, why not put Jamin Davis out there? I hated the fact that towards the end of last season, we had David Mayo getting more snaps than Jamin Davis, even though we were already out of playoff contention, so there was nothing to gain from trying to win those last couple of games. Why are we giving meaningful regular season snaps to David Mayo instead of Jamin Davis? That's been one of the most frustrating things that this coaching staff has ever done. I just don't get it. Why are we giving David Mayo more reps than Jamin Davis in practices? We already know what David Mayo is. He's not going to be any better than what we've already seen. At least Jamin Davis has a ceiling, so why not give him as many snaps and experience that he can get so he can get closer to that ceiling? And now moving on to the defensive backs, William Jackson III and Bobby McCain were practicing again today. Again, Wednesday was more so like just a veteran days off. Even though they participated in most of the practice, they didn't participate in 11-on-11s, but they did today. And then Cameron Curl, I mean, like I've been saying, the reason I haven't really talked about him much is just because he's always making plays. He's always doing his thing. But today, he had some really notable plays. He had a recovered fumble, and he filled the gap very well on a run stop at one point. And then, remember like I talked about with Cole Turner earlier, Percy Butler, with that hit that he had on Cole Turner, that wasn't the only positive play that he had. I mean, he had a really good run stuff against JD McKissick one play. He had that Cole Turner play where he lit him up after he made it catch over the middle. And I don't want you hurting our guys. Save some of that for the regular season, but still love to hear that he's out there making plays. And Percy Butler also had a really good run stop against Jared Patterson. And of course, Jared Patterson isn't like the strongest guy, but he is known as like somewhat of a bulldozer in a way. And Percy Butler met him right at the hole, stood him up, and held him up until everybody could corral around him and help bring Jared Patterson down. So I love that, because I'm not really worried about Percy Butler in space. I mean, granted, there's still some mental things, some awareness things, some instincts that he needs to work on, but he's so freakishly athletic. I love him in coverage already, and he's only going to get better, and I definitely hope he eventually takes over as our starting free safety, because he's one of the fastest, if not the fastest player we have in the secondary. It's between him and William Jackson. But out of the safety group, he's easily the fastest. And so if we can get that potential out of him, and we can get him to be more consistent, he has the potential to be one of our best secondary players and easily our best free safety, especially rangiest. But now that he's stepping up and making plays against the run consistently, had multiple of them against the run just today alone, man, that's really encouraging, man. That man Percy Butler stepping up, and with him making plays against the run like that, maybe he will have more of an impact as a Buffalo nickel than I originally thought. I mean, even though Ron Rivera said it after we drafted him that he would compete for the Buffalo nickel spot, I still feel like he's more of a natural, rangy, single high free safety that we've been waiting on for years. But if he's making plays like that against the run, he's going to be on the field at Buffalo nickel wherever they need him any given moment. And then his direct competition for the Buffalo nickel, you have Darrick Forrest, who's just been making play after play after play, and he was already flashing in OTAs and mini camps. Now in training camp, he's starting to become really consistent. He's always in the right spots and everything like that. You can definitely say he's been one of the 10 best players in training camp, regardless of position, offense, defense, whatever. And so I love the fact that the secondary is having themselves a really good offseason so far. William Jackson III, Kendall Fuller, Cam Curl, even Bobby McCain, and then the young guys like Percy Butler and Darrick Forrest stepping up as well, man. I love to see it. And then even Devontae Bosby, the corner that we just signed like yesterday, 2 days ago, got a strip on running back Jonathan Williams, so he's even out there making plays. Our secondary has been one of the better position groups of the training camp so far. It's really crazy. And then special teams wise, catching punts, it was only Jahan Dotson, Dax Milne, Kyrick McGowan, and Alex Erickson. Sounds like it's less people every time now. Jaquez Ezzard, I haven't heard his name mentioned as far as that goes recently. It sounds like they're starting to narrow it down, but hopefully my boy Jaquez Ezzard can get his name put back on the list again, because I'm really rooting for him. But those sound like your 4 guys right now, and like I've said repeatedly, I think Jahan Dotson will pretty much just be a guy that comes in situations. Like if we just really need a play, maybe you throw Jahan Dotson back there for a punt return. But I honestly think Alex Erickson will probably be the guy that's just the normal, usual punt returner back there. He's safer, and statistically he has really good return numbers as well. And then lastly, before we get up out of here, in random news, shouts out to Ryan Kerrigan and Chase Young staying after practice to sign autographs. Carson Wentz was interacting with the fans as well. Terry McLaurin per usual. But I mean, most notably, Chase Young, the fact that he's hurt and he's still out there giving energy on the sidelines. There were a few plays where he was like yelling at Montez Sweat and hyping him up and things like that during drills. And then after practice, he's one of the main guys signing autographs. I love it. Still affecting the team even while he's not able to play on the field in practice. Also, shouts out to Michael Phillips for these next 2 updates. First one, for fans attending tomorrow's open practice, there will be a pet adoption event behind section 130. Approximately 30 dogs will be up for adoption, and the Commanders will donate $15,000 to rescue organizations. I love that. That's one of my favorite non-football related news that I've seen from this team probably all year. Big dog fan, as you can see, so I love that, man. I'm not gonna lie. Also, shouts out to Michael Phillips for this second point. The referee at Washington's camp this week, Adrian Hill, is a DC native who is also an aerospace software engineer at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory Space Exploration Sector. Super random, but hey, once I knew it, I felt like y'all should know it as well. It's crazy that referees do have to kind of live multiple lives. You're not just a full-time referee and that's all you do. These guys do a lot of other things, and a lot of the time they're really smart, and one of them's even doing rocket science, which is always jokingly like the hardest thing to understand in cartoons. And then lastly, of course, the rookie duties. There's always somebody having to carry off a whole bunch of shoulder pads and helmets. Today it was Jacob Panajuik. So hey man, it was your turn today. Feel sorry for you, but that's just how it goes. Could be worse. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. Are you going to overreact to Antonio Gibson's fumbles? Are you going to overreact to Curtis Samuel's injuries, Cole Turner and Samus Reyes injuries as well? What is going on with this team right now? And of course, man, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors. Your name you see scrolling on the screen right now. Catch y'all later. I'm out.